I'm going to start right off with the results of this fasting study so you know what I'm talking about. This is a pretty different form of fasting, but the results on visceral fat are clear as day. So we can take this, we can learn from it, we can try it ourselves. I have, and we can have good results with it more than likely. Okay, the results are fascinating. So first off, there was a 33% reduction in visceral fat with this form of fasting, compared to a 14% reduction with regular caloric restriction. There was an 8.5% reduction in total body fat with this type of fasting versus a 4.3% reduction in total body fat with regular caloric restriction. Granted, in this study, calories were matched. Here's the real banger. Total abdominal fat loss, 23% in this type of fasting compared to 15.8% in caloric restriction. So what kind of fasting was this? How do we apply it? What do we do? First off, I want to hear if you fast. Are you into fasting? If you are, just comment down below. And I want to know what kind of fasting has worked the best for you. I'm trying to aggregate more data from people that watch my channel. I want to know what has worked mostly for people, because anecdote matters. A lot of times it matters even more than evidence, really. I want to know what works for people. So comment it down below. Also, just drop a comment for the algorithm. It helps. And please do hit that subscribe button. It helps a ton. Okay, so this type of fasting was called protein pacing. What the heck? All these different types of fasting, I'm going crazy. What is there? What is this? It sounds super complicated. It's actually sort of a mix of different types of fasting. And in a way, it's what we've been doing, but this particular method just works really well. Now, the important thing to note here is when you're looking at cardiometabolic disease and things like that, I did another video on this, breaking down the study in a lot of details in different ways, but there was a study published in Nature's 40,000 MRIs that they looked at, and they found that the only link to cardiometabolic disease was actually visceral fat levels. So you can go get a DEXA scan, you can go get an MRI. I have great interviews with Dr. Sean O'Mara. I'll give you a quick playbook on what Dr. Sean O'Mara says to reduce visceral fat before I get into the playbook of this type of fasting. He obviously talks about fasting. Okay, fasting is really important for visceral fat reduction. Sauna, okay, anything that increases growth hormone levels, so sauna, sleep, things like that. Sprinting, walking, and periodic bursts of extreme high intensity, and periodic, in terms of exercise, like zone 5, and then periodic bouts of high protein and periodic bouts of high carb independent of each other. Okay, you can watch other videos for that. So let's get into what this fasting study was and how we can apply this type of fasting. Before we get into it, if you're fasting, I recommend you try something called colostrum, but please, for the love of all things good, don't use any colostrum, okay? Use ARMRA, and the reason is they're the only ones with a biopotent cold technology that actually preserves the active components. So there's 400 sort of biologically active compounds in colostrum, but the moment they're pasteurized or heated, they're gone, they're useless. So ARMRA is very unique in that sense because ARMRA has this technology to process it and treat it in a cold fashion where it retains the function. Okay. They're at a lot of stores now, they're really making it big, which is great because they're the only colostrum I would ever recommend. So I notice better recovery. I have had gut issues my entire life, and so much of a recovery starts in the gut. And remember, when you're fasting, you break down that gut mucosal layer. So it's extra important to take care of the gut. So I think colostrum is in my top 5 things that I would recommend. So that link, tryarmra.com/Thomas, is a 15% off link. So the study was published in Obesity, and I'll just cut right to the chase. So here's what the fasting looked like. This is their fast, not my fast, okay? So one group did caloric restriction, the other did a unique thing. So they did one of 2 fasts. They gave them an option. For 8 weeks, and some people mixed it up, you could do either a 36-hour fast once a week or a 60-hour fast once a week. Those are the 2 options, okay? Now, during the days that you would fast, they did something unusual. They said at night, or really anytime during the day, but most people would do it at night, you can have 400 calories. And you might be saying, well, that's not normal fasting. It's not. It's unusual. But the thing is it's sort of like, for example, here's what it would look like. If you did a 36-hour fast, that's a day and a half, right? So with a day and a half, it would have looked something like this. Fast all day, in the evening, have 400 calories, and then fast again until halfway through the next day. Okay? If you were doing 60 hours, you would just do that twice. You would go all day, then 400 calories, then all day, 400 calories, and then resume eating the next day. But that's not fasting, right? Well, it is. You're still getting almost a 24-hour fast each time around, right? But what the researchers were thinking this could do is it could preserve muscle by having a little bit of food. In some ways, I disagree. In some ways, I say, I think the moment food comes in, your body turns on processes that might actually make you catabolize if you don't eat enough. However, the results speak for themselves. But what was most interesting about this study, please take this away because this is very important, is they controlled what they ate on the non-fasting days. It's the first study I have ever seen where they didn't just have them do ad libitum, eat whatever you want. They said, no, you need to eat this specific macros. So they ate 1,800 calories per day, and they had them do 35% protein, which is decently high, 35% carb, and 30% fat. Here's the important part. They had them eat 4 times per day, spaced evenly. And they had them consume their appropriate amount of protein ranging from 20 to 40 grams, spaced out with each meal, protein pacing. This resulted in some of the best, most profound fasting results I've ever seen. Head and shoulders above caloric restriction, even though calories were matched between the two groups. There were some limitations, like they didn't equate for protein across groups. But the point is that we've learned a new type of fasting here, where it's like, hey, instead of just intermittent fasting every day, keep it really strict for 4 or 5 days out of the week and monitor it, and then just fast for a couple days. It's really what I've kind of preached for a long time, with the one change that, hey, like you're going to have this little meal in between the days. I can make you a promise, and I felt this when I tried it. You're going to feel more hungry after you eat, because we all have experienced that. Like once the floodgates open, once you have food, all of a sudden you're hungry, right? It's funny how that works. It's like you're fasting, you go without food, and then all of a sudden you eat something and boom, you're hungry. But perhaps that's why it's working so well, okay? Maybe it's working that well because people are getting that little taste of food and it kind of upregulates glucagon to a certain degree afterwards, and you get even more into fat loss mode. Who knows? But the really important part is the high protein structured in a strict way on the non-fasting days so that you do not overeat. Probably the most and I hope you're still listening. This is one of the most fascinating parts of this whole thing. The desire to eat went down 17% in this type of fasting. However, in the caloric restriction group, the desire to eat went up 1%. So caloric restriction made them want to eat more. They made them more hungry. This type of fasting actually reduced their desire to eat by 17%, in spite of having that 400 calories throughout the fasting period, which I would have thought would have made them more hungry. But I guess the bottom line is that they were in such a good metabolic state and they had so much protein, they were satiated. So it proves 2 things. One, fasting does operate somewhat independently of calories. Okay, because things change. It doesn't mean that calories don't matter and that thermodynamics doesn't matter. Of course that matters. That's a legit law of physics. Okay, but it also stands us to really look at things and say, are we just a campfire burning hot? Like we're not just a heat chamber. Calories are a unit of heat measurement, right? So it's like, are we in a silo or like campfire where you throw food in us and it burns? No, things change all the time. And fasting might be altering some of this stuff. That's probably what we're seeing here. You're probably wondering, okay, but the fasting group lost muscle. No, they actually ended up with a better fat-free mass to fat proportion than the caloric restriction group. They had an increase of 5.7%. They actually preserved and even built muscle. This is what's very interesting here. I think that we can't just discount calories altogether, of course, that would be foolish. But we do need to look beyond that. Because when they ate the same amount of calories and you have this much of a discrepancy between the amount of visceral fat loss and abdominal fat loss, there's something there. So I think we've got a new type of fasting. Try going 4 or 5 days without fasting and then a strict like 36 to 60 hours with just like one little meal in between. I'll see you tomorrow.